So, Cynthia, I do want to catch you up on my personal training right now because you are coaching me to compete in Worlds for Team USA and the 100 meter and 200 meter. And I feel amazing. um,
Yay.
yeah, I feel strong, faster than I was in college for sure, and just overall more vibrant and healthy. And even before I had started working with you, I was doing a very similar nutrition protocol. I've been doing it for a few years now. And now combining that with the sprint training and the consistent lifting, the eccentric strength training has been so incredible. And I wanted to bring you back on today to just talk about the benefits of sprint training for our female athletes, but then also just for women in general, because our female athletes will stop playing sports one day. But I
Yes.
really want to encourage them to continue sprinting for their health. So, I guess maybe let's define what sprinting is because sometimes people get it mixed up with endurance and conditioning training. So, let's start there.
Yeah. Okay. That's a great place to start. So your viewers might already know, but I did run D1 track in college. I ran for it was Division 1, but it was a Colonial Athletic Conference in North Carolina, UNC Wilmington, and I was top 5 in the East Coast in the 500 meters indoors. But then I didn't run at all for 20 years. Like I just like you said, like I stopped running in college, which some of your girls, might stop soccer after high school or they might stop after college. But you do want to continue to exercise for health benefits. But what I found after returning to sprinting at age 40 was that when I started doing the research, I found that most women beside me didn't even know that sprinting was available. They thought all they had were marathons and 5Ks. And I know a lot of young women jump into 5Ks and marathons, that sort of thing as well, for a training goal because they feel like it's easily accessible. But what I try to teach other women is that there are races all over the country that you can jump into for sprinting 100 meters, 50 meters, even 60 meters indoor. So there are available opportunities for sprinting and competition to have that as a goal. And why that's important is because there are downsides to endurance training. So defining sprinting, first of all, that's a good question. In the research, they define sprinting a couple different ways. When I say research, I mean medical journal articles and that sort of thing, because there's a lot of medical journal research, especially in the last 5 years, on the benefits of sprinting, and we'll get into that. So how do they define sprinting? How do I define sprinting? That is, in the journal articles, they define it as sometimes they go 30 seconds all out on a bike, say, exercise bike. So 30 seconds all out with 1 to 5 minutes rest, maybe 5 times in some articles. In other articles, they measure the maximum heart rate. So your maximum heart rate is 220 minus your age. That should be your maximum heart rate. So vigorously exercising continuously in intervals at that heart rate is another definition. How I define it is anywhere from 50 to 60 meter training all the way up to 400 meter training encompasses sprint interval training. And I do think that 400 meter training is important because it taps into the lactate zone, which we'll talk about in a second too. But that actually has some benefits on the brain as well. But that would be for my athletes that I train. Sprint intervals are anything above 85% effort. So if your maximum 100 is 15 seconds, you're going to take a percentage of that and figure out what is your 85%. And sometimes you do intervals that have various rest periods that are at 85% or above. Most of my training as a world champion, my coach actually keeps me at 95% to 98%. Not often 100%. A lot of people think you have to go all out for sprints, but you really don't. Maybe in the short, maybe like 50 meters, 30 meters, that sort of thing. And I do have that in my sprint program. That would be closer to all out. And then you take a really long rest, at least 5 minutes. But something like interval 200s, that would be like run a 200, walk a 200, if you don't have a watch, but it's better to time it. Or all the way down to run a 200, take 1 minute rest, run a 200 at that 90% capacity, which is really tough. And that's what starts tapping into the lactate zone. Is that all clear? Did I define it well enough, or should we talk about the different zones of energy?
Yeah, I think that would be good to just briefly go over and what energy system we're tapping into with true sprint work.
Yes. Okay. So that would be the ATP creatine phosphate, which is your bursting energy right at the beginning. So say you're running a 200-meter run. And you're racing an all out 200 meters. You're going to burst for like the first 50 to 100. It's usually about 7 to 8 seconds. So, for various ages and athletic abilities, it's going to vary, but it's about 7 to 8 seconds. And we call that free energy because you're not tapping into any of your other systems. It's just that ATP creatine phosphate, which is glucose driven, but not necessarily by carbohydrates. You can create glucose. Your liver actually creates the glucose that you're using for this energy. And then you start to transition at about, I'd say about 15 seconds to 20 seconds, you're transitioning to the lactate zone. And that is when your ATP runs out, that explosive bursting energy runs out. Your body starts to try to catch up and make more pyruvate. And that is made through taking taking the glucose energy and transferring it into lactate energy. So that's when people think, okay, lactic acid, but it's actually not lactic acid. The lactate is the fuel that is created by our body to make up for the loss of the ATP. It's like very complicated, and so the lactate is there for the fuel, not causing the fatigue. So a lot of people think lactic acid causes muscle fatigue, like when your muscles are burning and you're getting tired. But actually, what research has found is that it's either hydrogen ions or calcium ions. They're even not sure what it is. All they know is that the lactate is there to make the fuel, not there because you're getting tired. I hope that makes sense. So that's the lactate zone. And then after you go through that zone, you start to tap into the endurance zone. So the 400 has a little bit of, when run properly, the 400 meters has a little bit of endurance and mostly ATP and lactate. So that can vary. So when you're running maybe shorter sprints, like 50 meters, that sort of thing, you're really generating that or going into that ATP zone. But then if you're doing several sets of them, you might end up going into the lactate zone if you don't have enough rest. So what does that tell us about sprinting? So if you're always in the endurance zone, which you're longer than usually 45 seconds or so, then you're going to actually foster more slow twitch fibers. So we have fast twitch and slow twitch fibers. When we're younger, we have more fast twitch fibers than when we're older. So it's especially important as we age that we maintain that fast twitch fiber content because it really starts declining even after age 25. So to maintain that, you want to stay in that explosive arena. So anywhere, I would say, again, like 400 meters or less for like your training goals, if that makes sense.
Definitely breaks things down really well. Now, I know you have a whole list of benefits of sprinting. Obviously, if you're an athlete listening, it's going to make you more fast twitch and explosive for your sport, but there's so many other benefits beyond your sport that we're going to get into. And I'm kind of wanting to tell you some benefits I've been experiencing to see if they're on your list. So let me go to the first one I noticed. And this happened within just a month of upping my sprints and doing your program. My body composition.
Wait, stop there. My program, by the way, also in case anyone's curious what you're doing, it does encompass everything from 50-meter training to 400-meter training. So it's a 3-day-a-week training block. And I really think this is beneficial for all ages. It's 1 day of fast explosive only, basically. And then the other days, one is volume, more like 400-meter training, we would say. And then the other day is like a race model. So it's a combination of both. So you're still maintaining the fast bit. So it's all three energy systems we're tapping into, but very little endurance.
Yeah.
So go ahead,
Yeah,
sorry.
it's been fantastic. And even in just the first month of the program, the first thing I noticed were the body composition changes. And obviously, I'm combining it with a very animal based diet with carbs that my body really agrees with, like blueberries and certain colored potatoes. But it's very meat forward, and also very high healthy fats as well. So the body composition changes have been crazy. I mean, some of my friends are like, "What happened to you? Like, you look jacked." And even my husband was like, "Oh my gosh, like your abs." And I'm like, "Yeah, they just like appeared." And I
Yeah,
really
that's
think
not the first time I've heard that.
sprinting
Yeah,
is one of the best ab exercises. So I don't know if the body composition and building the strength and lean muscle mass is on your list of benefits.
it is. It's number
Yeah, okay, I
seven.
knew.
Number seven on my list of top 10. And number seven is, yeah, body fat loss. And that is because when you're exercising at that intensity, then your body actually it requires more energy. And so it's browning the fat tissue, which creates more thermogenesis, which means it creates more, sometimes people call it like a fast metabolism, when your body creates energy even when you're resting. And so what we found in the research and in real life is that when you sprint, not only are you maintaining the muscle mass, which would be catabolic, which means eating your muscle mass in endurance training, you're maintaining your muscle mass and your strength, but you're using fat for fuel more often. And not only that, but you're using fat for fuel hours after you're done sprinting. So you can sprint in a session for 20 minutes, intervals for 20 minutes. You could even do like, say, 8 100-meter sprints with 3 minutes rest, something like that. And so doing a less than 30-minute workout will give you fat loss for hours afterwards, 3 to 5 hours afterwards, sometimes even longer, because your body has to now repair all of those tears, those little tears in the muscles that you've just made, in order to strengthen the muscle fibers back together again strong. So that's one of the reasons why that fat loss happens. And yes, as far as your abs go, you're losing that abdominal fat, but also it's a very big core exercise. When you're sprinting with proper form, you have to maintain that core strength in order to have good technique. And sprinting will make you honest with your form. Like, you can feel it when you're running fast if something's a little bit off. So you can really tap into all of those, upper body, core. No, it's not just legs. A lot of people think sprinting is just legs, but it's not. It's a lot of upper body and core. That's why you feel that way.
It's crazy. And an important point you made, you don't have to do sprint workouts for long. I feel female athletes and just women in general think they have to kill themselves in the gym for hours on end to get a strong and robust body composition. But with sprint workouts, they're efficient, and that's not the case at all. And your workouts are very short and quick. Really, the rest times are what's long. But like the actual bouts of sprints, it's super quick. Like you said, it's something that you shouldn't be doing for several hours. So
Yeah,
that's what I
we can talk.
love.
My number one reason why sprinting is more beneficial than endurance training is for hormone balance. So
Yeah.
when you are exercising for that long, training for a marathon, doing endurance training, when you're doing that for such an extended period of time, your testosterone actually tanks. Your body thinks it's in a type of survival mode, because it's not. Your body really likes to really run fast or exercise, let's say exercise vigorously and then rest, and then exercise vigorously and then rest. This is what our body likes. And we know this because all of the benefits cardiovascularly, brain wise, are coming out with this type of exercise. So if you're not giving your body time to rest, you're continuously exercising, it's actually causing a state of chronic stress. And your body thinks, okay, we need to survive now because we're running for this hunt or whatever, our ancestors did to run that far of a distance. And we're not eating, we're not fueling properly. Okay, we need to survive. So we're going to stop producing sex hormones because reproduction right now is not as important as surviving. So this is the mechanism of how hormones work in our body when we exercise too long. So better hormone balance, especially we look at in medical journal articles, male cyclists whose testosterone is in the tank. Cyclists are notorious for their long endurance training. Any kind of ultra marathon runners, their testosterone is tanky. You need to have really good hormone balance in order to thrive. Like we know hormones are a big thing, and especially for the young girls. Like they can end up with the female athlete triad where they don't fuel enough, they're exercising too long and too hard. You see this a lot with cross-country runners. But I mean, I feel like soccer should be a speed sport. And I talked about this before, like if you're a soccer player or a wrestler, you do not need to be doing long, slow distance. You want to maintain those fast twitch muscle fibers. So when my husband coached wrestling and he asked me for help with his training for his wrestlers, we had them switch from doing 3-mile to 5-mile runs to doing repeat 400s because they were still maintaining, or repeat 300s, repeat 200s, repeat 150s. They were still maintaining their explosiveness. Then they were getting rest, and then they were exploding again because that's what you do in your sport. You don't shuffle for a long time. Now in soccer, I feel like some people might say, well, we do shuffle. We shuffle for a long time back and forth, but you don't. You're right. You're running fast towards the ball. You need to have fast feet. Everything needs to be fast. Do you want a fast soccer player or do you want a slow soccer player as a coach, right? Of course, you want the fast soccer players. And so if you make them do too much as a coach, if they make them do too much long, slow distance, they're actually converting those fast twitch fibers to slow twitch. And that is not beneficial at all. So again, in cross-country runners, we see this too. We see the girls losing their periods because their hormones are out of balance because they're having too much chronic stress. So again, this vigorous exercise, rest. Vigorous exercise, rest. Much more beneficial for hormone balance.
That was going to be the next one I was going to say. I've healed a lot of my menstrual cycle issues in the past few years, but now more than ever, I am pretty much pain-free with everything, which is crazy. And my period it's only about 4 to 5 days now, and it's not heavy anymore. I know that's TMI, but a lot of
No,
girls
it's not TMI.
struggle.
We all need to be comfortable talking about this.
Yeah, it used to be really heavy and I would that first day I would always be in so much pain. I couldn't get out of bed, and now it's just like, oh, I notice it, but I can get on with my day now, and then I'm chilling for the rest of the 4 or 5 days, and I'm like, that was easy. It never used
Yeah.
to be so easy, and I think you're right. I think it's because in college I was over exercising, I wasn't doing enough sprint work, and I was definitely under eating. Now with your program, I have to fuel a lot. Otherwise, I'm getting nothing out of those sprint days. I'm getting nothing out of the eccentric strength training. So I think it's very important to also hammer home that you need that nutrition to support sprint training. And I'm going to link all of our episodes below that we previously talked about nutrition. So check those out
Yeah.
because that's a whole
Long
separate
story short is
podcast.
it's protein first. Protein first.
Yes.
Fat second. Carbohydrates last, and quality carbs, not quantity. Nothing irks me more than when I see these poor middle-aged women who are trying to lose their belly fat, signing up for marathons, and there's buckets of candy waiting for them at the start. Oh my gosh, just no. All of those horrible additives and dyes creating inflammation, and then they're doing this long, slow distance that's actually causing them to hold more belly fat. It's because your body, again, when it's high in stress and cortisol, it'll hold belly fat. So when I do my metabolic analysis, I measure 14 different places of where you store your body fat, and I take the ratio in between those places, and it tells me the whole story about how this individual is working, how their organs are functioning, if their the toxicity is high, all kinds of things, their insulin, their thyroid health, all of these measurements. It's based in Chinese medicine. The root of the program is a long time ago, ancient medicine. And so if you're storing belly fat, really your cortisol is high. So that could become, because of different things, but these poor middle-aged women with these buckets of candy, and then they're told to eat pasta the night before. It's just, they're really set up for failure, and it makes me sad for them.
Yeah,
And you don't want to, this starts early. Like you can start this earlier, like, and do your sport in high school or college, and then commit to a routine of vigorous exercise and rest, sprinting, hopefully. But if you don't like running, you can do it in cycling or rowing as well. A lot of people ask me that.
Now the next benefit, and I think this kind of ties into the hormonal balance and being healthy as you continue to age. So I turn 35 next week, and a lot of people say I don't look 35, which is very kind of them. But it has really been not stressing my body too much and doing this type of efficient training. So is there something to sprint training, or do you have it on your benefit list that helps with longevity or reversing aging in any ways? Is that on there?
Definitely, because that is actually, we'll say, number 9
Okay.
is reactive oxygen species, ROS, if anybody wants to look it up. ROS is the oxidative stress that our body takes from the environment, from our exercise, and all of the toxins that we're having to go through in our day. Because let's just face it, we're surrounded by toxins. We have fumes from various fabrics, furniture, gasoline, jet fuel in the air. We have plastics, which if anybody watches or listens to Huberman, Andrew Huberman just had a really fun guest on who's 89, and she's an expert in how phthalates and different toxins from our environment affect our hormones and fertility. Really must listen to podcast. I learned all of it from my mentor Charles like 15 years ago, but I feel like hardly anybody knows about these toxins and how they affect our hormones. So basically, we have all of these things that stress our bodies, but we can even increase our oxidative stress by training too long. Endurance training greatly increases ROS. And then we cannot consume enough antioxidants. This is in the literature, in the medical literature. There are not enough antioxidants that we can consume to mitigate the ROS from endurance training. And so what does this mean for aging? That means that the more oxidative stress you have, the shorter your telomeres are going to be. Your telomeres are the caps on the ends of your chromosomes in your DNA. And so if you could think about it, every time your cell needs to replicate to make a new cell, it chops off the end of that telomere. So you want really long telomeres. And some people are born with longer telomeres, and that's why they can get away with eating junk food for longer than other people will say. Or you might see that athlete that's like, oh, they just eat Cheetos and they're like the best athlete on the team or something like that. Well, I can tell you that that may be the case for a few years, but eventually that's going to catch up to them in metabolic disease. And that's what I try to prevent for everyone. That's why I do what I do. So your telomeres, there are things that lengthen these telomeres. Sprinting is one of them. Red meat is another one. Things that shorten telomeres, smoking, and high excess sugar. There's a great book called The Telomere Effect by Dr. Epple and Melissa Epple, and she specifically targets sugar as the culprit for shortening telomeres, which are the markers of our aging. So sprinting, vigorous exercise, resting, that lengthens telomeres, anti-aging, longevity, and the endurance training actually increases the reactive oxygen species that we can't mitigate. So more oxidative stress.
That
For
makes a
your viewers.
lot of sense, and I, like, even look back on when I was in my 20s at, like, some pictures, I looked a little bit older than I was because I was eating a ton of sugar, I was drinking a lot of alcohol and over-exercising, and it makes sense. My body and my cells were just so stressed, and now I don't do those things, so there you go,
Well,
everyone,
the thing
that's the
too is
hack.
that eating the red meat is really high in glutamine and glycine, which both of those are amazing for your skin.
Yeah.
So glycine, a lot of people take collagen now mistakenly in their coffee. Don't put your collagen in your coffee because caffeine inhibits glycine, which is why collagen works. It's high in the amino acid glycine, which makes collagen, and it makes your skin amazing. I'll be 50 in a year, so a lot of people also say, well, gosh, you definitely don't look like you're going to be 50.
Nope.
I don't dye my hair or anything. Like, I do wear a little bit of makeup. I've been making my own makeup because I'm really into the skincare lately, making my own skincare. But, like basically, yeah, it's that when you fuel properly for nutrient density, and you do exercise that's beneficial to you instead of hurting you, then you thrive and you have that youthful glow.
It's not just about what's on the outside, of course. The next thing I noticed was my brain was sharper and I have more energy now, and it lasts throughout the day. It's sustained. And I didn't used to have that. So is that also on your list?
That is actually one of the main things I talk about with sprinting. And
Okay.
that is, yeah. Oh my gosh. I love talking about sprinting and brain health because I'm going to try to I read over 50 medical journal articles a week, and I try to read 2 to 3 books a week. I speed read when it's one of something my mentor taught me that was really important for our research. So when people ask me like, how did you get this answer? Why do I say it? Like sometimes I just say, okay, red meat's really good for you. And they go, why? And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I have to explain like thousands of articles to you. So I'll try to explain it very simply the best I can. There, in our brain, there's a thing called BDNF. It's brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and it's basically like fertilizer for your brain. And it creates brain health as far as cognitive performance and plasticity. Plasticity declines after age 25, and plasticity is when you can learn new things. So you always want to be learning new things, but it's harder after age 25 because our brain has stopped forming. And there are ways that we can increase our cognitive sharpness and the plasticity. And one of those is sprinting. So they found that BDNF increases during exercise, but it increases the most after sprinting. And there is literally, it doesn't even say high intensity. High intensity also is good, but it says sprint interval training increases BDNF. This is important because it makes us smarter and it also makes us happier. So I always say sprinting is beneficial for you because it makes your brain health so that you're smarter and happier. You have less anxiety. And not only that, but it can actually stave off Alzheimer's and dementia. If you have dementia in your family, you need to listen up to this because your plaques start building in your 20s towards dementia, and you need to clear these plaques. There are cells in our brain called astrocytes. I was showing my 10-year-old last night. He was actually looking at some of my research, and he was like, what's that, Mom? It's because it's a cool looking cell, these astrocytes. It's the little cell, and then it's got all these tentacles that come out from it. And these astrocytes in your brain wrap around neurotransmitters. They wrap around those tau tangles that create the plaques, right? They grab them and they get them out of your brain with the lymphatic system, which is our lymphatic system we've known about for a long time. It's what clears metabolites and junk from our body. But it's only recently in the past 15 years or so that they've discovered the lymphatic system, which is our brain, in our brain. Our glial cells, our other cells besides the astrocytes, they shrink when we sleep. And the cerebrospinal fluid goes through and cleans up all these metabolites and flushes them out down through the lymphatic system. Okay, so again, I'm trying to be simple, but I think you're following, yeah? So the astrocytes are important in grabbing those metabolites and those amyloid plaques and clearing them from the brain. And what they've found, and a lot of people don't know this, so I get really excited to talk about it, is that when you sprint, you have better polarization of this protein called AQP4. And AQP4 is what sends the junk from your brain out. And so if you don't have proper polarization of this AQP4, which comes from having good astrocytes as well, they work together. So you have to have good quality astrocytes and a lot of them, which comes mostly from sprinting. If you look up astrocytes sprinting, you'll see better quality and more of them. So they work together with AQP4, and that clears, it's a water channel protein, it clears all of that from your brain. And so a lot of people, again, they don't get this far down into the research to know about this. I'll just say, oh yeah, it's better for your brain. But I get really excited to explain why. So the polarization is key of the AQP4. And what they found is that there's better polarization of the AQP4 in sprinting than in endurance training. Yay!
Wow. I feel like I'm in science class right now. That's all I'm going to be thinking about when I sprint next. is
Yes.
everything you just explained.
Your little
Um,
astrocytes multiplying.
right. Yep. I'm just going to be
Cool.
picturing it in my head and just
I hope
running
somebody looks up
faster.
what I hope somebody looks up what astrocytes look like because they're just really cool looking cells.
I'm definitely going to look it up.
Okay.
Um, yeah, the brain benefits have been crazy. Yeah, just feeling more awake and focused and just overall excited for the day. I do my sprint workouts like late morning, like 10 or 11 a.m., and I'm just great the rest of the day.
I
And
know, I feel the
you know,
same way.
whether you're an athlete who has to do school practice or get your homework done, doing some sprints before homework and
So
lighting up
efficient.
that brain is so good. And then for us coaches, I'm ready for my sessions for the rest
Yeah,
of the day and going till 7, 8 p.m. at night. And yeah, just so many great benefits for all ages, for all
right.
female athletes and women.
Another benefit, if you don't mind me jumping into
Yeah,
another
let's go to the
one
next one.
that I'm thinking of is that there's less overuse injury.
Oh, yeah,
So
I was gonna say that. I don't
Mhm.
feel sore, haven't gotten injured yet.
No,
So,
you haven't
yeah.
gotten injured. You won't get injured. Part
Yeah.
of that is the eccentric training. We'll touch on that for a second.
Yeah.
Oh, you just had a great little clip today about somebody on there saying that jumping is better, jumping and sprinting is more beneficial in many cases than Olympic lifts. And I can
Oh,
tell
that
you
was so great. I was
that when
in full
yeah,
agreement.
I know. No, hey, we're not knocking Olympic lifts. There is a time and a place, but I cringe when I see people in certain types of gyms doing these Olympic lifts, these snatches, these cleans, everything with terrible form
It's all
because
over the place.
they
It's
get injured.
all over.
They have a certain body type. They're always injured. It just drives me crazy because my mentor was Charles Poliquin, who's a legend in strength training, and then my strength coach is also one of Charles's top students. So I write strength programs, and he's like level 10 in writing strength programs. So I learned a lot from him as well. And basically, when he wrote my strength programs for being the fastest in the world in the 400, by the way, I ran 57 seconds at age 43, in case anybody wants to know. And I ran a faster indoor time than I did in college. So I'm really tapping in further than my genetic potential in college. But he wrote my programs with 0 Olympic lifts. I ran 26.0 seconds in my 200 in my 40s at age 44 with 0 Olympic lifts. Why? Because eccentric training, which means going a little bit slower on the lowering movement. So if you're squatting, maybe you go down 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 6 seconds you can go, or even longer, but usually 6 seconds, 4 to 6 seconds is what we work with for sprinting. And by doing that, you recruit more muscle fibers that are fast twitch. So a lot of people think, no, I have to move the bar fast. And Charles used to say, it's actually not moving the bar fast, it's moving with the intention of going fast that creates more results. And by lowering eccentrically, and you change it all, you can change the eccentric all the time so that your body doesn't become adapted. But basically, like a 4-second tempo will recruit way more fast twitch fibers without the risk of injury because you're not doing that explosive movement where you're out of control if you're not doing it with correct form. People get these egos in the gym and they start loading up the weights because they want to look like, oh, look how much I'm lifting. When in reality, if they're actually just lifting slower with less weight, they're going to have less injury and more results in fast twitch muscle fibers. So that's also one of the reasons you haven't been injured. But a lot of times with the sprint intervals, people think, okay, I'm just going to, without any kind of strength training or preparation, just go run and then they pull a hamstring or something like that. Well, of course, you have to warm up dynamically, not static stretch. If you static stretch, you're more likely to pull a hamstring if you're pulling the rubber band too thin. But if you warm up dynamically for, 15, 20 minutes, and then you go and you do your sprints, you're going to be injury free. I was injury free my whole entire master's career running faster than college, right? So it's possible. And when you're doing this long, slow distance, you're creating these movement patterns that are not necessarily correct. Sometimes we've all seen those runners on the side of the road that are, with a crazy form. And if you really, even if you have great form running long, slow distance, you're creating movement patterns where you're putting too much repetitive motion on certain tendons and bones. And those bones are not getting that much stronger. Actually, they're getting
And
weaker.
the
Getting
muscles aren't getting that much stronger either.
no, you're because it's
Yeah.
catabolic. So it's
Yeah.
taking muscle, it's eating your muscle tissue because it needs fuel to keep up with that long, slow distance. So it eats your muscle tissue. But
Yeah.
when you sprint, your bones become stronger. And by the way, in case anybody doesn't know, our bones regenerate every 10 years. So you get a new set of bones every 10 years. And you want to keep as you age, you definitely want to keep those bones strong. So the impact of the sprinting, as well as jumping,
Yeah.
and strength training, but especially sprinting, will keep your bones strong and not give you things like stress fractures. So overuse injuries is definitely one of the reasons I don't recommend endurance training.
I have seen that a lot with my athletes, since we've all started consistently doing sprint work even during the season for the past few years. None of them have had any injuries, which is crazy because they're
So
playing
great.
a lot of soccer year round, and you would think, "Oh, adding in more sprinting or runs would be harmful," but it's not. It's just the right dose to get them
Yes,
strong and fast. And I did wanna ask you about the hamstrings. Is sprinting a good hamstring strengthening exercise? Because
absolutely.
if you're jogging, you're not really stimulating that hamstring as much.
Yes, hamstrings, quadriceps, hip flexors, core. Again, we talked about core because you really, when you're sprinting, you should be trying to bring your knees up. And your hip flexor is really important for that. So your hips, your glutes, of course. I mean, look at a sprinter's body type
I was
in the
just gonna
Olympics
say.
next to a distance runner who's
Yeah.
running marathons. Look at the body types. As we age, we need that muscle mass. Muscle is the organ of longevity because it produces hormones and myokines like irisin, which has impacts on our brain again. So our brain health. So really, that maintaining that muscle mass, not so much muscle mass like a bodybuilder. That's important too. We call that in strength training hypertrophy. So my mentor would say that's all show, no go, meaning you can actually build your muscle size without building your muscle strength. And so when you're building hypertrophy, that's really high rep ranges, usually around 10 to 15, sometimes even 20, but high rep ranges, uh, usually with some slow eccentric and concentric, depending on the program. You're building your muscle size, but not your strength. I'm all about strength endurance rep ranges and strength training. And that is to build your actual strength. And that prevents injury. And that helps you age better.
So what is the next benefit you got?
Okay. Another one I'm passionate about that a lot of people don't know about is heart health. Now, you would think that if you train for a marathon, it's good for your heart, right? Because you're exercising. And while exercise is good for your heart, for your cardiac health, too much exercise actually is terrible for your health. And when I say too much, I mean endurance training. And so if you look at the literature in medical journals and a lot of research that's just come out, the ultra endurance runners and marathon runners are having scarring and fibrosis in their heart. Because what happens is there's this really fascinating article, I'll have to send it to you. And it talks about, well, first of all, there was a book called Born to Run, I think it came out in 2008, and it really made a big deal out of how great long distance running was for you and this and that. And the star of the book actually died a couple of years after on a normal 12-mile run, an easy 12-mile run, because he was an ultra endurance athlete, of cardiac arrest. And so I think a lot of people have probably known someone who was a marathon runner and super fit, but they have had heart attacks. And this is because, I'll send you this article. This article talks about how the right chamber, especially, enlarges in 1 in 3 marathon finishers. They found 1 in 3, despite their fitness level. So it means it could just be the mom who's eating the candy and the pasta, you know what I mean? Trying to lose the belly fat. It doesn't have to be the ultra, elite marathon runner. But 1 in 3 marathon finishers had enlarged right chambers of their heart that, when done repeatedly through training and more marathons, caused scarring and fibrosis, which led to more cardiac arrest. So I think this is shocking to people. A lot of people don't know this. You can damage your heart by too much endurance training. And when they found sprinting, it was not the case if you sprinted then rested, because that enlargement didn't happen. If you sprint continuously for an hour, yes, it would happen. I mean, you just can't possibly do that though, right? But if you somehow vigorously train, well, I guess you would think maybe like elite milers. Elite milers are probably doing really vigorous work for a long time because of the nature of their race. But anything vigorous for 60 minutes, not good. Endurance training, low intensity for 60 minutes, not good. 30 minutes or less, beneficial for your heart. And so when we say 30 minutes or less, think about what you just said. How many minutes are you actually running and you're sprinting? You're mostly resting. You're definitely not running 30 minutes. So this falls into the category as good for your heart. Whereas, oh my gosh, if you just look up, cardiac hypertrophy, or an athlete's heart is another one where athletes get arrhythmias because they're doing too much endurance training. It's all there in the medical literature. So
I'll link some of that below as well. I have heard about some of this research as well. So if anyone's interested in looking, I'll leave that below. But it's super fascinating that that's happening.
yeah.
Now, what's your next benefit of sprinting?
Okay, let's see. We have better hormone balance, makes you smarter, makes you happier, overuse injuries, heart health, body fat loss, holding on to muscle, ROS, better ATP4 response. And I got one more.
Okay.
And that is gastrointestinal problems from endurance training.
Wow, interesting.
Yes.
Well, I did want to tell you, my gut health is perfection.
Awesome.
And everyone's
hardly anyone can say.
But you know what's so crazy? I was sold that lie for all those years. Oh, well, red meat will rot in your stomach. You'll be constipated. And I'm sorry, everyone, TMI, but it is actually the opposite. Super easy trips to the bathroom now, and everything is perfection. It is a darn miracle.
Yeah, it's really funny how people, like my husband went carnivore a couple of years ago for, like he went for a couple of months carnivore, cleaning up his diet and, trying it out and everything. And oh my gosh, he got so much crap from his friends saying like, how do you go to the bathroom? How do you poop? And he's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, it's
actually better.
So easy.
It's more regular and better. Yeah. And like it looks the right way, like just all the things when it's not saying you have to go carnivore, but what my mentor taught me, which was what I taught you and others, is that animal protein based, number one, fats, healthy fats, number two. And there, of course, are a list of some fats are better than others, some are vegetable oils and things like that.
Yeah.
Not a good example of fats, but maybe an avocado is, or nuts if you're nut tolerant, but not all nuts because some are moldy. So, that's why they hire me, because I give them the list.
Yeah, but, and one other thing I cut out that I realized was causing a lot of the digestive upset was dark leafy greens like spinach and kale. And I also cut out the cruciferous vegetables. I just didn't do well with them. I got a lot of bloating and gas. So I just figured I'll get my vitamins and minerals from other ways that I can tolerate.
Right. And of course, meat is one of those ways.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Rotting in the gut is also funny because meat is actually, animal protein is broken down in the top part of your stomach with your stomach acid. And it doesn't even make it to your colon when that digested properly. So like you actually digest your meat. It doesn't rot at all. It gets digested in the top of your stomach and, your upper intestine. So, and all of that protein is taken out in that area, and all of those great nutrients like zinc and iron and magnesium, and I mean, just the list goes on. We talked about that before in another podcast. But
so sprinting helps with your gut health too.
Yeah, so sprinting helps with your gut health because what we eat and how we exercise. There's a really great article in one of the journals in athletic performance and science and athletic performance. I have to think of the name of the journal exactly, but and they discovered that they did a kind of a meta-analysis, which means they took all the different studies and combined the results together. And they found that the higher intensity, like sprint interval training, creates a better gut health bacteria profile than does endurance training. The you actually can change your gut bacteria by running too much or endurance training too much, cycling, running, rowing, whatever you're doing too long. And again, what's too long? A lot of people might say, what's too long? I would say anything that's going to develop your slow twitch. So if you're not at that 85% and above in your intervals, then you're probably running too long slow distance, but definitely 60 in the literature, definitely 60 minutes, 45, 60 minutes and longer at long slow distance. But yeah, it actually, and you can look this up too. Your listeners can look it up. If you type in endurance athletes gastrointestinal, just type that in and you'll get all kinds of research where endurance runners are known for their gastrointestinal problems because their gut bacteria is changing to try to create fuel or to try to, because our gut bacteria actually makes nutrients to feed themselves. So I don't know if you know that, but you think that they're there for us, but they're really not. They're kind of just there to thrive on their own, and they create certain vitamins by breaking down foods for themselves to eat. So they're feeding themselves. And when they're put in that stressful situation of that endurance training, certain ones survive, certain ones don't. And then you end up with gastrointestinal problems as an endurance athlete. So it's better for your gut health to do that vigorous rest.
Wow. I'm going to look that up as well and put some links in the show notes for that because that's a
Yeah.
new one for me. But it does make sense because isn't also that stress on the body that comes into play when you are doing too much endurance training and long slow distance? Does
Yeah.
cortisol have anything to do with it or?
Cortisol and also just chronic stress in general. So chronic stress can be defined as people have chronic stress when they are working too many hours or too long, or they're constantly in a state of fight or flight. And then again, our bodies will adjust our hormones because if we're in a state of fight or flight all the time, for too long of a time period, our sex hormones will shut down because it's not time to reproduce. Our nature does not want us to reproduce in a state of fight or flight. So by enhancing the catecholamines that are those neurotransmitters for fight or flight, like that excitement, the adrenaline, and by jacking them up and then blunting them right away with a proper fueling, like say whey protein while you're still breathing hard, that will blunt your cortisol. It stops that long chronic stress. But when you're training too long, that chronic stress just keeps going. And again, everything in our body is thinking, okay, we're in trouble. We know we don't have enough to eat. We don't have enough fuel. We're really exercising too long because we're going to try to survive. So optimization is not putting our body in a state of stress for extended periods of time, but optimization is putting our body in stressful situations for a short period of time and then allowing it to recover and rest.
And one thing I really like about your program, and I do this well with my girl athletes here in Tampa and remote, is our work days are usually work days and then the rest days are rest days. So I love that idea of combining your sprint work the same day as your lift, doing the sprint work first and then waiting a couple hours if you can. And then that next day, it's full recovery. And I think that also plays into why there's less injury as well with something like this. It makes a lot more sense to do it that way, especially if they're having soccer practices like 3 to 4 days a week. You want those rest days to be truly off.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't really take recovery days
No.
seriously,
I
or
don't think female athletes or women do. They think they have to
um,
constantly grind and train and out-train their opponent, but those gains happen during those off days.
exactly right. And physiologically, those gains are happening in the rest period. So when you're doing that vigorous exercise, you're tearing the muscle fibers apart, and then you want them to have time to recover and strengthen really well. So if you keep tearing them, they're not going to strengthen that well. And how I set up my sprint program with the strength training is I advise if you can to do the sprinting in the morning if you can, and then the strength training later in the day because you should always do what's most neuromuscularly demanding earlier in the day if you can. But by doing it that way, you have an actual rest day the next day. And it should be 4 to 6 hours ideally but if you can only take two, it's better than none, but don't go from one to the next. Like you should absolutely not strength train before or after sprinting. It should be 4 hours apart, 4 to 6 hours, ideally.
Yeah, that's been really amazing. And gosh, the importance of recovery is so key. And I think if our female athletes are going to add in anything supplemental with their sports practices and games, it has to absolutely be sprint training. It has to be strength training. And then those other days, take off and recover. You don't need to do all this extra stuff. You don't need to go for a run. You don't need to go on,
Mhm.
a bike ride at the gym or stationary bike. Just
Yeah, skip the
do your
20-minute biking,
sprints.
skip the 20-minute Stairmaster, skip the
Yeah,
20-minute run,
skip it.
skip
Yep.
it for sure. If I feel like I want to get my blood moving or something, sometimes after dinner or something like that, or maybe instead of my normal warm up before I lift weights, sometimes I like to just get the blood moving. I'll actually go to my hill right next to my house, and I'll start with just, I actually don't even warm up. I just start with a slow pace, and I do these short hills that are only basically 7 to 10 seconds long, depending. So maybe they'll start out at 10 seconds, and I'll do maybe like four at 10 seconds, which is, not just a comfortable pace, but I'm going up the hill, which is resistance, and I'm forced into that dorsiflexion for sprint training. And it's enhancing all of my posterior chain, my glutes and hamstrings, everything I need for sprinting. And that is so much better than if I were to go jogging for 10 minutes, right? So maybe I'll just do, I don't even know, like 6 to 10 short sprints up the hill instead of a long jog. But only if I feel like I have that, and I don't add too much extra, because I know how important that recovery is. So I'm not adding a lot extra, if that makes sense. But instead of doing that 20-minute jog, you can think about maybe doing 6 10-second sprints instead up a hill.
Yeah, and those hill sprints are so valuable for that acceleration in first few steps because of the horizontal displacement. So I think
Yes,
if
exactly. The
they can
ankle.
do anything else, I mean, there are probably a million other things you should do before jogging for 20 minutes if you're a female athlete in team
Yes,
sports.
100%. There is one thing I would like to mention. We talked about strength training, and it came to my mind specifically for soccer athletes. I know that there's a lot of knee issues, and there is a guy out there, the knees over toes guy, who, he basically did a mentorship or internship with my mentor Charles, and all of his work is my mentor Charles's work, and then he rebranded it. But it is all correct. But I was going to say, if there's any one exercise that your soccer player girls should be doing, it's pull-up and step-ups.
Mhm.
100%, 3 times a week if you're a soccer player, I would say. Like, add this in. And what it does is it strengthens your VMO, your vastus medalis oblique, which is right above your knee in your quad area. And that protects your knee from injury. So if there is one exercise you should be doing, it's the pull-up and step-up.
I'll link that as well. I don't think a lot of people have heard of that.
Oh yeah, it's it's
Yeah.
it's gold.
Yeah, and honestly, if you can combine that with the sprinting to get the hamstrings, gosh, you are gonna be set up for so much success injury-wise and performance-wise, so
Yes, it's
I
going to
think
only benefit you.
I think for, our female athletes listening or their parents listening, again, sprint work is so important. It is a non-negotiable, and yes, obviously, there are great performance benefits. You're gonna be way faster and more explosive on the field, but think about this list Cynthia just went over. I mean, we have body fat loss, ideal body composition, hormonal balance. That is such a big one for our girls. Brain benefits, less overuse injury, better heart health, better gut health. Really think about these as you're trying to figure out, okay, what type of training can I fit into my schedule with their soccer or sports practice? Because you have to really put health first, and then the performance comes with that, I believe.
Absolutely. Just because you're an Olympian doesn't mean you're healthy. Like, I'd like to say that I have worked with many clients that have come to me who are Olympic athletes that have or were diagnosed with prediabetes. They're coming to me like, look, I'm super fit. Why do I have prediabetes? And I'm like, it's because your nutritionist told you to eat all of this sugar for energy. Like, let me fix you. um, Autoimmune issues. Just because we see an Olympic athlete who's larger being successful at their sport doesn't mean that they're metabolically healthy. What I do with my clients, whether they're the lady next door or Olympic athletes, is I make them healthy first, and their athletic performance skyrockets after that. And for your target age group that you work with and who might be listening, let's just tell you also sprinting is more fun. Sprinting is more
all my
fun
girls
for
say
your
that.
young girls than the endurance training. You ask these young girls, do they want to run 5 miles or do they want to do short sprints with proper rest? I'm not talking about sprint, and then don't rest and sprint back, that kind of thing. Like, they're going to have more fun sprinting, and that's going to keep them more engaged in their sport. They don't have to do that 5-mile run. They can do sprint intervals instead and have fun with it and feel better, feel happier, be smarter in school, have more fun. It's such a great benefit to add into your program. So again, I just want these girls my passion is to help others thrive. So I want these girls to be healthy and happy, and I don't want them overtraining and underfueling and having eating disorders. If you sprint and rest and eat fuel properly with nutrient density, you do not have eating disorders. Let me tell you, I have reversed eating disorders from these girls who are overtrained and underfueled just by introducing nutrient-dense foods and less intensity in their training.
And look, I don't want people to think that this is us hating on endurance training. If it were good for you, we would be doing a podcast on all the reasons why it's good for you. And Cynthia would definitely hammer that home. But Cynthia really wants female athletes to be healthy all around. So I highly recommend you check out this research because she has really studied this topic and really believes in the power of sprinting for health and performance. And the fun thing you mentioned, that is so key. I don't think I've heard one female athlete in 13 years of coaching and being in this. I don't think I've heard one of them say, I can't wait to run a 2-mile run, or I want to do that, Coach Erica. They all say, we want to sprint, we want to race, we want to do relays or chase after something. They all crave sprinting. It stimulates them and it keeps them coming back and loving training.
Absolutely. I love it.
Awesome. Well, Cynthia, thank you. This was a great conversation. I'm about to go get to training and we're going to do some sprints today, of course.
I'm doing my longer day today, so I have some longer intervals to do today, and then I'll do my shorter intervals in a couple of days. But I'm so excited to see you at World Championships in Florida in March.
Can't wait. I will see you there, and I'll see everyone on the next episode.